2020 has been a challenging year for everybody. In a couple of hours, we bid farewell to it. We're going to discuss with Kemp, a clinical psychologist, just how we move forward into 2021 positively at the back of the kind of year we've had. Chris, thank you very much for speaking to us this evening on New Year's Eve. As I said there, it's been a terrible year. People have lost their livelihoods, they've lost loved ones, in many cases they've lost hope. And nothing is likely to change at midnight tonight. We're going to be dealing with COVID-19 well into next year if, experts are to be trusted. What's the danger in wishing time away until this pandemic has passed?
I think that hope that you're talking about is sort of one of the big issues we're dealing with, is that psychologically we always feel like a new year ushers in something new. And I think we all wanted 2020 to be the year of the pandemic and 2021 to be sort of a fresh start. And so I think this new wave has sort of let a lot of people down, and especially with New Year's plans getting cancelled and beaches being closed, I think it has a big psychological impact in terms of, like you say, we're trying to usher away time that should be the time that we are using to rest and recover going into New Year. Now we are sort of wishing that away along with the rest of this terrible year that it's been. So I think that we need to make room for ourselves to recharge and relax in whatever way we can, because we are going into another potentially difficult year.
So many of us are struggling because we have little or no control over what happens to us. No control over our work situations, very little control over our health. Many of our decision-making powers as individuals have been overruled, absolutely for good reason, by the government. But that powerlessness can lead to frustration, to depression, to increased anxiety. How do we cope and use that as a learning experience instead?
Well, I think you've nailed it in terms of that loss of control and the anxiety that creates. When we think about panic and anxiety, we often think about feeling trapped. And I think that what you're getting at is essentially that we need to find control in the areas of our lives that we still can control. We may not be able to control our surroundings or some of the environmental circumstances around us, but we have agency within ourselves in terms of how we adapt and how we react to that environment. So I think everyone should allow themselves to feel that frustration and allow themselves to sit with that sense of discomfort, but at the same time look towards how they can adapt their own personal lives in order to best deal with these ever-changing circumstances where we don't really have a predictable outline of what's to come.
Fear often comes with that lack of control, fear of the unknown. What will happen to my family, to my friends? What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? Give us some practical tips to process fear instead of just burying it.
Well, I think you've nailed it in saying that it's about processing it rather than burying it, and that is really the most important. So what I always encourage people to do is to not undermine their feelings, to not feel like, oh, I'm being silly or I shouldn't overreact. Anything like that is really just unkind to yourself. How you feel is how you feel, and we can control our actions, but we can't control our feelings. So it's really, really important that you allow yourself to process that fear and anxiety. And I always encourage people to kind of sit with the discomfort, is how I describe it. So take a deep breath, try and connect with what you're feeling, allow yourself to experience and process that, and then for each person personally, they can sort of figure out, okay, where to from here? What can I do in my life to help mitigate some of these feelings? But I think you've hit the nail on the head saying that let's process it and sit with it rather than burying it.
On to a happier note, how do we start the new year with positive energy, with a hopeful attitude, and learn to identify victories, however small they may be?
Well, I think that it's important to not force ourselves into positivity if that's not how we're feeling. I think the path to positivity and hopefulness is allowing yourself to process some of the frustration and anger that you have. And everyone's different in this regard. Some people like to look to the future and look positive, and that's great as long as you're not dismissing or suppressing the negative feelings that you do have. That being said, psychologically, like we said, a new year is still a new year, and there's a lot that we know now about what to expect, what to anticipate, and what has worked for us and what hasn't. So I'd encourage everyone going into the new year to figure out what worked for them this year, and maybe more importantly, what didn't work for them in terms of establishing routines and predictability. My number one tip to everyone in these uncertain times, where you're working from home or you're working half and half, or who knows what you're doing, to try and establish some sort of predictable routine for yourself, so that at least you can feel like you know what's coming tomorrow, even if it's on a micro scale of just your daily life.
Well, thank you very much for those wise words. Chris Kemp, a clinical psychologist, speaking to us there about fears and anxieties as we head into a new year. We can do it.